Let your spirit rise.
I am speaking with Christopher Hahn, who is General Director of the Pittsburgh Opera. He was appointed the General Director in 2008, but he's been with us as Artistic Director since 2000. I remember when you first came. It was such a great influx for the Pittsburgh Opera.
It was such a long time ago.
No.
We don't still remember.
No, remember, we were just talking about that. We haven't aged at all.
It's passed in a flash, I have to say.
It really has. You're getting ready for the Passion of Mary Cardwell Dawson. A lot of events circling around that particular thing, including Denise Graves coming into town and having a delightful evening with her.
Yes. So this piece, The Passion of Mary Cardwell Dawson, which I think we'll talk about in more detail shortly, has become for us a great rallying cry in the community to say, look, here is this story, here is this person, here's this extraordinary woman who so many people had completely forgotten about, didn't know that even existed. And through all of the things we're doing, including the presentation of this piece, we are seeing a real awareness beginning to dawn and break out in the community. And it's not just here in Pittsburgh, it's actually nationally and internationally. So we have arranged a slew of community engagement projects, several of them in Homewood itself, which is the home to the house, the National Negro Opera Company house on Apple Street in Homewood, and several of them done at our building. Yes, one of which, Denise Graves, who, when she was here singing in that world premiere of ours about Josh Gibson, and she was playing the girlfriend, that's when she first, that was 2017, first became aware of the story. So whilst Janae Solomon, the extraordinary owner of the house, who has been beating the bushes since the year 2000, yes. Actually, when she gave this fascinating presentation just this last week, in which she said when she drove past the house, she saw the plaque, she Googled Mary Cardwell Dawson, and she said there was zero, just nothing. Nothing came up at all, and she couldn't find anything. She had to keep on digging and digging and digging. And then she said just recently they did a search and there were 15 million impressions. So this long, slow, hard work is beginning to bear fruit. And the coming together of this piece, The Passion of Cardwell Dawson, is a really, really major part of it, because just simply by doing it, by Denise discovering it, by Denise being asked to star in the world premiere of it at Glimmerglass, which of course happened during the COVID season, she's got a megaphone. She's formed her own foundation. She has been absolutely galvanized by the story of this woman. And I keep on thinking Denise is not dissimilar to Mary Cardwell Dawson. She's a firebrand of talent and energy and focus. And so that now somebody who came to Pittsburgh, discovered the story, was amazed and energized by it, is now also like raising awareness with Janae Solomon is a very, very important moment in our history.
It really is. I admire Janae Sullivan so much because she just has really dug into it for such a long time. And I know that she has gone to numerous singers in town, but it is so nice to have recognition with Denise and the fact that the house is being, money is finally being put into it and things are happening.
Well, awareness is happening. And I think if you were talking to her, it has been a long, slow road. And I think she talks actually movingly about how learning about Mary Cardwell Dawson gave her the strength to persevere, because there were many times, I think, in the last 2 decades when she thought, this is just impossible. Nobody's listening. It's not going to go anywhere. And the house is crumbling before our very eyes. But looking into Mary Cardwell Dawson's own determination and focus and never giving up and always having to raise money and produce and deal with all sorts of pressures, I think has been an enormously powerful influence on Janae and other people who've sort of started to delve into this. I mean, that being said, this is really only the beginning for the house. I mean, it's been stabilized, it's got a roof on it, but there is so much more to do. And there's so many complications. The complexities of restoring a house of its nature and its size to its original glory is massive and not lightly undertaken. So there have been wonderful responses, particularly from some of the bigger foundations, but the work is really just beginning.
So when you were choosing seasons, getting ready to announce and everything, how did you find out about the Passion of Mary Cardwell Dawson? Have you been in there since the beginning? My longtime friend and colleague Francesca Zambello, who is the artistic director of the Washington National Opera, but at the time was also the general director of Glimmerglass Festival Opera in upstate New York, near Cooperstown. She called and let me know that she was trying to put something together about Mary Cardwell Dawson. And I said, look, okay, keep me in the loop. Let me know if I can do anything. And Francesca's a bundle of energy and focus herself and achieves many things very, very fast. And she was throwing together the creative team to make this happen. And she talked to Denise, I think, really early on. She talked to Sandra Seaton, the playwright. She talked to Carlo Simon, the composer, to bring the elements together to create this piece. And it came together really, really quite fast. And I think now's a good time to say that the piece, and I keep on calling it the piece because it's not an opera. It's an amalgamation. It's really a theater piece with music, some of it which is operatic. And the closest analogy I think people register with is the Broadway theater piece Masterclass, which was built around the idea of singing and music, but was really Maria Callas showing the students what she had to think about the pieces, but also what she thought about things and her own life and her own perspectives. So this is very much in the same mold. Right. So I understand, because I had the opportunity the other day to speak with Allison Cambridge, who's performing the role of Mary Cardwell Dawson. Also, Frank, Christian Mark Gibbs, just wonderful folks that are a part of this cast. Isabel is being sung by Merowe Khalil Adib, and of course, one of the resident artists, Jasmine Awalia, who's been featured throughout the last 2 years in numerous productions. It's really quite wonderful. So she was talking, Allison was talking about how it really is so important to have mentors and teachers, and how that person, Mary Cardwell Dawson, was that to these young singers.
Exactly. So it's this sort of eternal, age-old master student, the guilds, somebody working on goldsmithing would spend 12 years, at the foot of the master, and then would finally be allowed to exactly the same thing happens in the singing world. And so the identification of these teachers or icons or inspirers is so crucial for the handing on of the great tradition. And actually what you're seeing in this theater piece is she's not only trying to pull off a performance that night, she's actually rehearsing these young singers in the roles. She's combating terrible weather because the situation takes place in Washington, D.C. during the summer, which we know is prone to thunderstorms.
Marshland, yes.
And she used to perform on the banks of the Potomac as just an open-air place where she didn't have to manage all the segregationist policies about venues. And so she's dealing with all of this, the thunders coming, the lightning's going. The singers are getting increasingly anxious because all they're hearing is she saying, no, we're not going to perform in your venue if you force us to segregate the audience. And they're saying, but I want to perform.
Of course.
I understand, I agree, et cetera, but please, I have to be on stage. So it's a sort of it's a combination of the age-old issue of the teacher teaching, the mentor learning and wanting to jump up and do, and then the prevailing circumstances around it, which beset every impresario, every producer. In her case, a very, very tough and unwielding inability to go into venues. But those of us who are in that sort of producing mold, we encounter all the time a series of obstacles. And basically what we do is we're trained to deal with those obstacles and overcome them. And a few of them are as daunting as what she had to put up with. But you could tell in her spirit that she was a serial entrepreneur and a serial producer.
Right. I mean, and being a entrepreneur yourself, a producer, it seems challenging, just sort of more and more challenging. And I think it's challenging getting back from, people got used to sitting at home. So getting people back into the seats is kind of a challenge.
It's an enormous challenge, and we're all facing it, and we have all been so impressed by the loyalty of our core audience who have stuck with us. And I think we were the only opera company in the States who managed to maintain live indoor performances through the pandemic. And I'm going to sort of tell you an illustrative story about the challenges of pulling together something like this. So as I say, Francesca pulled it together. It sort of came about the year before COVID, and then I actually went to Glimmerglass Festival where she had to pivot, that wonderful word, and all the performances were outdoors. Now, Cooperstown is also quite hot and steamy in the summer and quite prone to rain and thunderstorms. So she was sort of doing exactly what was happening.
Right.
And it was so ironic that in the piece where the thunder is happening, there was actually some distant real thunder. So there I was, like hardly anyone. I think I was at the dress rehearsal. There was no one there. It was the middle of the afternoon. It was stinking hot. I mean, it must have been about 90 degrees. And here the performers, including Denise, were in their 1940s, proper wigs and outfits, et cetera. And they did a run of the piece. And then there was this pause, and no one was, we weren't talking to anyone, so we're at it. What's happening now? They're going to repeat it. We're going to do it a second time because they had so few rehearsals. And they started the rehearsals again. And then the young, I think she was the soprano who playing the role of Michaela in Carmen. She got up and she was starting her little bit, and then suddenly she sank to the floor. And I thought, I don't remember that from the first run round. And the poor thing had just succumbed to
the heat,
and the exhaustion and whatnot. And Denise very calmly said, "Stage management, I think we need some help here. Let's stop." And they stopped and they helped the young singer off, and off she went. And then they continued the rehearsal.
Wow.
With the stage manager reading the lines, just underlining how, this is a really, really tough world we're in. They're in the middle of a pandemic, and fainting and heat and exhaustion. Nothing really is allowed to get in the way of the preciousness of pulling these things together. And we've got to be careful that we're very, very careful about our performers and the surrounds, et cetera, and as we all were as we were performing. But I think it sort of underlines, as I say, how tough it is, how challenging it is, and how audiences are realizing how much they lost, realizing how much they missed the live connection. Of course, many people went, "Oh, this is great. I'll watch Netflix all."
Yeah, right.
It's fun. Oh, let's do the digital stuff. I'll just stay in my jammies. But I know from countless conversations, whilst some of us have sunk back into the pleasures of indolence, others have realized how vital human communication is. And it's not just between us and the stage. It's between us and the audience, ourselves and our audience members. What did you think? How did you respond? Oh, look, everybody's responding the same way that I'm feeling. This is amazing. Yeah. And that's such a validation of the theatrical process and also the human condition.
Speaking of scheduling, things that really slipped into the right space, a Tetris thing that worked out was, of course, Emily Richter.
Emily Richter, yes, one of our current resident artists, all of whom are fantastic, by the way.
Oh, they're all great. Yes.
We just had a recital recently when 4 of them, not Emily because she's out on a release somewhere, sang art song recitals, an art song recital, and material of which they themselves curated, they chose themselves, and those of us in the singing world and that little bubble, we all bemoan the loss and the lack of actual this material of art songs. And it is really, really so fantastic to hear these singers who not only have chosen the materials because it means so much to them, but delivering them so beautifully. So, but Emily, yes, one of our second-year residents, had a busy day a while back when we were rehearsing Iphigénie en Tauride, which we performed at the Kappa Theater in January, and she came to me and said, well, the Met district competition auditions, it's called the font competition, is actually on the Saturday of the opening. What am I meant to do? And I said, well, seeing you'll be opening that night, let's just make sure you can sing as early on the day as possible. And she went, okay. So they were very obliging, and she sang, I think, at 11:30 in the morning, and then heard she'd been passed on to the regions, and then sang the opening night of Iphigénie en Tauride, really spectacularly, I should say.
Yes.
I mean, not as if she was like tired or anything like that, or a little stressed, as anyone should be allowed to be. And then she won the regionals as well, which meant she went to New York, and then that was a little gloomy for us because she was covering the role of Violetta, and we knew that if she went and prevailed, she would be out of the theater here, and we wouldn't be able to access her in case we needed her. But she prevailed, and she then appeared at the finals, and then she was one of the winners. So we had the opening night of Traviata, where she was not present in Pittsburgh covering. I jumped on a plane, and a couple of us cheered her on, and it was really great to see and hear her. And she sounded fantastic on the Met stage. And so she's a very good example. We've had a number of other singers who've been winners at the Met competition. And that's just one of the many competitions. People know about it because it's the Met, it's the Met, it's the Met.
Right.
But there are a number of other, high-profile competitions and positions because sometimes competitions are great, but landing a year-long contract at one of the German houses, several of our singers got contracts at the Berlin Opera recently. So it's gratifying. It never stops, and we've got a whole new bunch coming in.
A whole new bunch coming in. Yes,
season.
I will miss these, but I will look forward to meeting them. Of course, there is the wonderful tie between you and Vuvu Mpofu with our Violetta Valéry singing La Traviata. It was wonderful to have her here.
It really, really was, and this for me was a sort of a personal returning to origins, because when I was a kid, I think I was about 6 or 7 or 8, I was taken to my first opera performance, and it was actually a touring black opera company, because my little town didn't have an opera company, a touring black opera company, all black, in South Africa, which was a very segregated place. So it was really a carbon copy of what Mary Cardwell Dawson was doing back here in the 40s and 50s, and this was in the 60s. So I'm sure they didn't know about each other, but that same kind of determination. We're surrounded by obstacles, but you know what? We're going to perform. We're going to perform opera. We love this music, and we're going to do it. So my first opera was La Traviata.
Oh, wow.
In my hometown of Port Elizabeth. And the fact that then, despite all of the sort of restrictions, the art form of opera in South Africa. I think it was a fantastic hour-long program on NPR just a couple of months ago. Was very in depth and very consistent, and one of the strongest operatic trainings at a university that I know of, and has produced a slew of performers, including the wonderful Vuvu Mpofu, who was obviously came along quite a long time after my first Traviata in Port Elizabeth, but growing up in a small town, you think, got to get out to the big city where all the excitement is. But Vuvu went to high school in Port Elizabeth, and her teacher said, "I think you have a voice. You should. I'll introduce you. Go off to Cape Town," and the rest is history. So not only was she fantastic as Violetta, but we were not really announced one of the operas that we're going to do in 25, 26, but she will be coming back.
Oh, wonderful.
In a role debut, and her eyes lit up when I said, "Can you do this
Would
role?"
you,
And she
please?
said, "Oh, yes."
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Well, speaking of seasons, I mean, you have next season coming up, which is, of course, Tosca and the Cavpag, Cavalleria Rusticana and Pagliacci, Armida, Madama Butterfly, and Woman with Eyes Closed. Wonderful season once again to enjoy at both the Benedum Center, but the Kappa, and also probably at the George R. White Studio. With is that where that women?
Yeah, Woman with Eyes Closed is in. Yes, it's in our chamber opera in the building, and that's by the fantastic American woman composer Jennifer Higdon.
Oh, is it really?
It is.
Yay!
And that's a world premiere. So that too was a
exciting.
piece that was developed pre-COVID, and then it went off the rails. And Jennifer was very, very delighted to grant us the world premiere. Otherwise, it's a very heavily Italian season, as you can imagine. So when, I think that the Pittsburgh Opera Orchestra played for Andrea Bocelli when he was here a couple of weeks ago, and the audience was crammed with a lot of excited people, and a lot of Italian people with Italian backgrounds and families and origins. And then so I'm just waving the flag. Like, there's a lot of Italian opera in Pittsburgh. Come and see it. It just hasn't been in concert with Andrea Bocelli.
Right. And I love the big Italian operas that will be performed at the Benedum, but also when you do the intimate works at the Pittsburgh Opera headquarters, there is something about that is so mesmerizing, because it's like you're in the space. It's like you're in the opera or in the theater piece, because these pieces are a little bit more unusual, proving up all of those amazing pieces that shouldn't be missed.
You're right, and what I hear so much from the audience is the power of the voices is so incredibly obvious when you're in that small space. I mean, and I think that many people who are not familiar with opera, when they go to the big theater, they just automatically assume it's all amplified. Like, big deal, the voices are big. Of course they are. There's an amplification. And I frequently say, because I know this, so I say, you do know it's not amplified. And they will stop and say, what are you talking about? Of course it must be amplified. We could hear everything. Yep. But when you're in that small space, it's very, very
then
obvious. It's
like,
not amplified, but it's just natural amplification. And that's the part that I think grabs people, because it's the close encounter with this extraordinary activity.
Right.
This voice production is an athletic, activity, akin to an Olympic performer, and there's no way when you're right in front of them that you know that you can get away from this fierce talent that they possess, and the amount of focus. And of course, the audience is not meant to know this, by putting them, as we often do in the round or in this sort of alley thing, we layer on challenge upon challenge upon challenge for these singers, because the conductor's up in the gallery, and there are these monitors and timing and cues. It seems, that's that technical stuff. No, you really, as you well know, you really need to know exactly what's happening every second. And then thinking back just a year when we did that fabulous piece, Denise and Katya, when on top of all the other challenges, no conductor, earpieces.
Click track, yes.
Like click track. Four cellists. Those performers, one of whom was Jasmine, as you notice, who's in the Mary Cardwell Dawson, were extraordinary in their overcoming their initial terror and then becoming absolute pros and being able to produce that very, very challenging piece.
Absolutely. Now, you heard your first opera in Port Elizabeth. Did you sing at all yourself, or did you just enjoy?
Well, I was in the church choir.
Okay.
In fact, I was the leader of the church choir.
Okay.
I did the boy soprano thing. I sang solos in church and all that stuff. In fact, my mother, insisted I take piano lessons when I was 5.5, I think, and I really didn't like practicing that much, but I loved singing in church, as often happens with singers. And then I really wanted to give up the piano badly, but I wasn't allowed to. And I said, well, I will refuse to go to them unless I get voice lessons as well. So I got voice lessons actually before my voice broke, and then as it was breaking, and then for a little bit after, and then high school intervened. So I got all the basics early on.
Excellent, excellent. Well, that's why you're used as judges in these competitions for young singers. So you've had a very, very busy time here in Pittsburgh and everywhere and internationally. And Christopher Hahn, thank you so much for spending a little bit of your very valuable time with us this morning, General Director of Pittsburgh Opera. Congratulations.
Thank you so much. Only made valuable because of the time here. Thank you. Thank you for always being here to listen to us. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks.
Spirit Ride.